the dangerous mission by SEAL Team 6 that reportedly failed.
A failed U.S. military operation in North Korea.
And U.S. Navy SEALs reportedly shot and killed a number of North Korean civilians during a botched covert mission in 2019.
There is a warning baked into this story from the very first second. A small group of men in black neoprene blend into winter water, glide toward rock and shadow, and trust that months of planning will be enough. One mistake, and the cost is not a headline. It is an international incident, a hostage crisis, or a war that nobody has the appetite to fight. On a frozen night in early 2019, a Red Squadron detachment from SEAL Team 6 eased out of the Pacific in the dead of night and crept toward a North Korean shoreline with a single brutal objective that could rewrite the balance of the talks then unfolding between Washington and Pyongyang. Plant an electronic device that would let the United States quietly tap into the inner circle of Kim Jong-un. No bravado, no flourish. A simple installation with consequences measured in megatons. Everything about the plan said, do not blink. The timing was chosen around tides, moonlight, and fishing patterns. The platform was a nuclear submarine nearly 2 football fields long that slipped into position without fanfare. The ride to shore would be in wet submarines the size of a large predator. No dry comfort, just 40-degree water and heated suits. A 2-hour endurance test before anyone even touched land. The men carried unmarked weapons and untraceable rounds. Their headsets would stay quiet. If they spoke too loudly to the ocean, North Korea would hear them. If anything went wrong, the mission died in silence and everyone disappeared. This was not a stunt. It targeted a blind spot the United States had lived with for years. North Korea is sealed tight. Recruiting sources is nearly impossible, and signals intelligence runs up against a wall of geography and paranoia. In the first months of the Trump administration, the need sharpened. The relationship between the American president and the North Korean leader swung from friendly letters to open threats. In 2018, tests stopped, handshakes started, and the world squinted toward the possibility of calm. But inside the room where risk is counted, nobody knew what Kim intended. That is why this plan gathered speed. A new piece of electronic kit promised to turn intercepted air into insight. There was a catch. Somebody had to cross the water, crawl onto that beach, and bolt the future into place. The choice fell to the only team that makes sense when a mission must work in the dark. Red Squadron trained for months in American waters. The drills stopped feeling like drills. They became a rhythm. Submerge, release, swim, install, withdraw, repeat. The template came from a precedent many people do not know exists. In 2005, American special operators had slipped a miniature sub to a North Korean shore and slipped away again. If that could be done once, perhaps it could be done again. By the fall of 2018, while public diplomacy strolled in front of cameras, Joint Special Operations Command secured the green light to prepare for the real work. The final go order would come only when the submarine was heading into a communication blackout. That choice alone shows the level of risk baked into every step. There was no comfort of live drone coverage. Overhead video that usually feeds commanders frame by frame could not fly here. Anything buzzing above the peninsula would be spotted. Satellites and high-altitude assets could provide stills, not streams, and those would be minutes old even in the best case. Nothing would beam into the mini-subs. Encryption might as well be a flare gun. So, the team went in with silence as both shield and blindfold. That constraint shaped everything. Without live eyes, they had to trust pattern analysis of fishermen and patrols, winter quiet, and night itself. The world on that beach would be whatever the men found when they lifted their faces out of the water. In February 2019, the calendar added pressure. The White House announced a nuclear summit in Vietnam for the end of the month. If the device was in place by then, it could tilt the table. The submarine moved, the mini-subs launched, and the plan shifted from briefing to execution. Near the target, the water was calm and shallow, the kind of clarity that sells postcards in another life. The mini-subs descended to the seabed to park in their pre-planned orientation. In darkness, the first sub touched down exactly where it should. The second overshot and had to loop back, small on paper, large in hindsight. Now, the two craft faced opposite directions. Time was tight. The team chose to release the swimmers and fix the parking later. Hatches slid. 8 SEALs slipped into the black and moved toward shore, the device packed and ready. Every few yards, they lifted their eyes through the skin of the water and scanned. Nothing moved, nothing spoke. What they did not see was a small boat bobbing nearby, crewed by North Koreans wearing chilled wetsuits that bled almost no heat for the goggles to pick up. It is a detail that feels trivial, until it crackles to life. The difference between an empty beach and a fatal decision can be a degree on a lens. Onshore, the swimmers began stripping out of dive gear. The target sat a few hundred yards away. Back at the mini-subs, the pilots tried to solve the orientation error. Doors opened for visibility, a pilot throttled the electric motor to swing the craft around. Maybe the wake turned heads. Maybe a glint from the cockpit glazing carried across the top water, like a whisper you wish you had not heard. The Korean boat stirred. Flashlights cut across the dark. Voices carried. From the cockpit, the boat still looked distant enough to be harmless. From the shore team, it felt 2 breaths away from discovery. There was no calling up to the submarine to ask for counsel. No live feed for a command center to draw a box on a screen and say proceed. The mission commander sat miles away with the reinforcement package. The men on the rocks had seconds to decide whose reality to trust, the view from the glass at depth, or the sense of danger pulsing in their throats. Then a man dropped from the boat into the water and started moving toward the glow. The senior enlisted SEAL on the beach carried the weight of that moment in silence. He steadied his rifle and pressed the trigger. The others followed. After that choice, ambiguity evaporated. The plan had a rule that could not be rewritten on the fly. If you encounter anyone, abort. That beach was no longer a place to install anything. It was a place to leave. The team swam to the boat to clear it. There were no uniforms, no marked weapons. Evidence would later support the conclusion that it was a civilian crew diving for shellfish. 2 or 3 people, all dead. In the logic of this work, leaving the bodies where they lay would bring security forces faster than any radio call. The men took measures to conceal the dead, including actions intended to ensure the remains did not rise to the surface. It is a sentence easy to read and hard to live with. The swimmers pushed back to the mini-subs and triggered a distress signal. That ping set off a chain the public never sees. The nuclear submarine edged into shallow water that it usually avoids, exposing a massive asset to coastal defense risk because the operator calculus said the danger of capture was greater. Inflatable boats and another detachment waited to surge toward the beach if needed. Stealth aircraft sat farther offshore as a second response force. In the end, the first package was enough. The mini-subs docked, the hatches shut, and the big boat ran for deeper water. Everyone came home. Satellites saw the reaction the next day. North Korean military activity spiked around the coastline. The state said nothing publicly. Perhaps they found a scuffed rock and a disturbed patch of seabed and told themselves a story that did not include Americans. Perhaps they knew exactly what happened and chose silence. On the American side, the operation never existed in any official account. Key lawmakers responsible for overseeing intelligence activity were not notified before or after. That omission sits in a gray area that lawyers could argue about. But the larger point is simpler. The circle of knowledge stayed very small. The summit in Hanoi went forward at the end of February. The cameras flashed. The handshake was brisk. Talks collapsed without a deal. 2 months later, North Korea resumed missile tests. In June, the 2 leaders met again in the demilitarized zone and staged an image that played well on television. A short step over a concrete line and back again. It began and ended as theater. From that point on, the missiles multiplied. In the months that followed, North Korea launched more than in any previous year, including platforms that could span the Pacific. By American estimates, the arsenal today includes roughly 50 nuclear warheads and enough material to make about 40 more. Intelligence wins and losses are rarely visible. Outcomes are. This is where the warning tone returns. When a country treats special operations as a scalpel for problems that diplomacy cannot cut, it accepts that sometimes the blade slips. Even a perfect rehearsal cannot account for a fisherman who chose a different cove, a current that nudged a nose a little too far, or a flashlight beam that swept an angle the model did not include. The men who bear that risk are trained to make choices without a chorus in their ear. In 2019, that process resulted in civilians dying in cold water during a mission that never reached the objective. The politics did not soften because of it. The negotiating table did not tilt. The missiles did not stop. The price was paid in secrecy. Look at the design of the operation and the chessboard it sat on, and you see the calculated audacity. A nuclear submarine creeps into hostile water. 2 wet subs carry a team through 40-degree seas to a shore in one of the most closed countries on Earth. No real-time eyes. Communication blackout. Reinforcement packages staged at multiple rings out, ready to burn across the horizon if a call for help even gets through. The best in the world at moving unseen, trusting each other and the plan plan, stepping into harm with no guarantee that anyone will ever know what they tried to do. Also look at the broader frame. During that first term, senior Pentagon leaders believed that even minor military friction on the peninsula could spiral. Thousands of artillery pieces pointed south, American troops stationed within range, a nuclear program growing by the year. When the commander-in-chief signs an order that places Americans on North Korean soil, even for minutes, it signals immense confidence in the unit and a willingness to gamble high for information. Whether that bet sought immediate leverage in talks or a longer-term edge is a question that sits with the small circle in the room at the time. Those officials did not comment for the record. The White House offered nothing. Joint Special Operations Command did not add detail. Silence holds. The anatomy of failure here is not loud. It is incremental and human. A parking orientation reversed because minutes mattered. A small boat outside the cone of expected activity. A flashlight beam that turned the stomach of a swimmer who had already survived cold and distance and time. A single round fired by a senior enlisted operator who had to choose between the safety of his team and the possibility that the boaters were nothing more than civilians, with no idea they had brushed past a live wire. That choice cascaded into an abort signal and a dangerous exfiltration that bent a nuclear submarine into water it usually avoids, all of it invisible to the public until long after the ripples had smoothed out. It leaves behind uncomfortable questions. If the oversight chain was not fully informed, what does that say about the calibration between elected authority and covert action? If the device had been successfully emplaced, would the intelligence have materially changed the hand in Hanoi, or would it have fed longer-term analysis while the public theater stayed the same? If you accept that these are the kinds of risks modern states take, how do you count the ethical weight when civilians die far from any declared battlefield? None of those questions have tidy answers. They tend to sit quietly for years, then surface in fragments when memories loosen and sources talk. What is certain is the discipline of the men who train to do this work. They do not write the policy. They absorb it, rehearse it, and execute inside its constraints. They navigate black water with their own breath humming in their ears. They shoulder the memory of choices made in seconds that never leave. In the official story, nothing happened on that shore. In the private story, everything did. A mission conceived to unlock the thinking of a closed regime never reached the point of installation. The broader arc of diplomacy moved on. The arsenal on the other side grew. The warning remains clear. In a world where a spotlight can be a searchlight and a fisherman can be a tripwire, the distance between a clever plan and a dangerous outcome is shorter than anyone likes to admit. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.